Then I put us into a draft to make sure we didn't have to wait a ton,
Okay.
and it has now filled. So we're going to head back over there. And I was going to say, I hope we have a top 2 pick or top 3 pick, but we have the 110.
We're back to the 110, same spot that we drafted our first draft today from. As we fire up our third draft, we had done the 106 in between. It would have been really fun to get in one of those early 3 spots as well. But that's all right. This 110 was, as far as we were just getting done talking through our draft from the 106, as far as how that played out, we liked it, but it offered some different challenges and some things. And we ended up with the early running back, third round running back, but anchor running back. And it was a great value on Kyren. But being in a little bit of a different position with our build from there, everything felt a lot more comfortable from the late draft spot, I would say. And so if I had to pick whether we would double up a 110 today or a 106, I would have raised to the podium to say that I would like to draft from the 110 again. That was so much fun the first time around. One of the things there, Shawn, on our first draft, we passed over Puka Nacua for Garrett Wilson. Matthew Stafford fell a little bit in that draft. We ended up doing Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers. I had wanted to maybe ask some thoughts from you, but I think I like Stafford more than Rodgers for a variety of reasons. But that potential to then backstack either of those quarterbacks when you go with their star in the first, because they are sort of the end of a certain veteran QB window. There's some late youth upside. Anyway, as we made those QB decisions later, I saw some of the argument for having just taken Puka at the beginning, potentially. We are 1 pick away. Puka is the top option with A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson behind. We'll see if we even have that decision again, but I just wanted to address that. If you want to take Puka this time around, I'd be in for it.
Yeah, I think he's a good pick. I do have him below Garrett Wilson. It's a matter of, do I want 2-1 Garrett Wilson over Puka? Do I want it 3-1? Am I willing just to take 0 Puka and fill out with some Cooper Kupp? I think that one of the things you mentioned about Matthew Stafford is that you do have Kupp, and so you've got another elite receiver to carry you through some of the elements, whereas I guess I'm skeptical about the other Jets pieces. Should we get a little variety and go with the young second-year superstar?
Yeah, let's do it. We'll play it from ADP. You said on our first stream, I really wanted to take Garrett Wilson as our first pick of the year. It just seemed so fun. But you had said on that stream that if we're taking Garrett Wilson over Puka Nacua in that spot, then we're just never going to take Puka. And we don't want to never take Puka, I don't think. So we'll go ahead and take him here at the 110. Garrett Wilson goes right behind him. A.J. Brown had gone 1 pick ahead of him. Drake London does go at the 1-2 turn. Saw some of that in the pre-draft range. He started to rise, and we talked about him being kind of the end of a tier. And so we get Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison, Drake London. We're 1 pick away from Jahmyr Gibbs potentially making it back to the 203. He actually does go. And so now by ADP, it's Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Kyren Williams, and then Brandon Ayuk. It's a tricky range here, Shawn. We don't have a ton of time. I would say that Kyren Williams, Devon Achane, and Chris Olave are the names that you floated in this range last time. The only other guy for me would be Jonathan Taylor to consider, but I'm comfortable with reaching for anyone else.
Let's take Jonathan Taylor. He's a little bit our guy. He's somebody we've made the case that his ADP isn't broken, that he should go here. When you think about the addition of A.D. Mitchell and what that could do for the offense, I just think it's going to be tough to get volume to the receivers. At the same time, I think it's going to be tough to really focus defensively on Jonathan Taylor because you're going to have the rushing QB, which we know that has some conflicting impacts on the running back. But if you're talking about them having now a dynamic receiving core, you have a mobile QB. I mean, Taylor has had to spend a lot of his time as the star. The defense knows what's coming. He still flashed in many, many cases. One of the things that I point out, he didn't have as dynamic a rushing season last year, in part because until the very end, when he's trying to carry them to the playoffs in week 18, he didn't break a lot of those long runs. And yet you look at some of the elements with the evasion rate, they're still there. We know that, he either wasn't healthy or, maybe wasn't quite healthy, was in a little bit of a conflict with the team. That gets you off to the slow start. I think we're going to see much closer to pre-2023 Jonathan Taylor. And yeah, is the very top end, which I think you can certainly get with McCaffrey and Robinson and Hall. Is that there with Anthony Richardson? I think probably not. Is a 20 point per game, I say that in the full PPR format, obviously this is half, can you get up there and be a guy who is a league winner even at this price? I think that he can. I mean, you contrast that with the problems that Saquon Barkley is going to have in Philadelphia, and now with, it depends on what you think about Will Shipley, but maybe a sneaky backup. You contrast that with the problems that Jahmyr Gibbs has, where he loses a ton of the high value touches on his own team, the problems that Achane has now with the multiple guys there. I mean, really, the player who I think is still the easiest case to make is Kyren Williams, who we were able to draft in round 3 last time.
Yeah, love all that. The Taylor thing, I mean, I think people are just forgetting, as you said, kind of how his season played out last year. It was just one of those weird seasons. And that doesn't mean that you just write it all off, but starts on PUP largely because of a contract thing. They went right down to the wire, remember? And it was, were they going to trade him? What were they going to do? And they said they're not going to activate him. And everyone's reaction was Jim Irsay played chicken with his own running back and refused to back down, and now won't have him for the first 3 games because he backed himself into a corner saying, we're not going to activate him off PUP. And then he, in the preseason range, right? Like the early August range. So he misses the first 3 games. He comes back. And by the time he comes back, Zach Moss is playing good football. And so they kind of bring him along slowly. And then as he starts to really get going, Anthony Richardson gets hurt. And now you're playing with Gardner Minshew. And it's just a very weird season for the Colts. They couldn't just immediately get rid of Zach Moss, and they had to continue to use him some because he had been pretty good. But they went to Jonathan Taylor like reasonably quickly, quicker than I thought they would, like quicker than Zach Moss deserved based on his stats. But when you look at his, his actual play, probably was a little bit fair. At any rate, they really went to him. You talked about his week 18, 30 carries, 188 yards. That was the Jonathan Taylor that we knew from prior to last season. And I think you had to feel really good about what we saw from Richardson and really good about what we saw from Shane Steichen and feel like this is going to be a pretty good Colts era going forward. I feel good about their offense and their team. And Jonathan Taylor being the lead running back and kind of the workhorse. He did get his contract as well. That was the other part of his timeline last year. He ended up getting paid. And so, I think you got to feel really good about him coming back and having a strong season this year, being happy, being ready to go, having a really aggressive offseason because it's been a tough couple years for him. Shawn at 310, Malik Neighbors makes it all the way back. He's a 25.8 ADP. I'm going to make the case for Jalen Hurts here. No, I'm just kidding. I was trying to pick the whatever player down the list I could that would most make you gasp. But we're going to go ahead and take Malik Neighbors well behind ADP. Yeah, that's a player that we, in the pre-draft range, we're talking about potentially taking in the second round. You were higher even still than me, but I got a lot of him in my drafts of the 2-3 turn and felt great about that price relative to feeling like Marvin Harrison was probably going a little high. Harrison moves up with his expected landing spot in Arizona confirmed, and Neighbors is now sliding. Is that right? Does he not often slide this
going
fall?
to the spot that we thought he was going to go to? That part doesn't make sense to me. I have him in the mid-second to get him in the late third. Feels like Christmas morning, which is why we do these early drafts, Ben. They are so much fun. Are you all in on the Rams? Do you want Cooper Kupp here? He's a pretty decent value. We could go Tank Dell. We could go Travis Etienne, T. Higgins, Zay Flowers.
I think I want to just – because now Kupp is the ADP value by 4 picks. We did take Nacua. Some of the Nacua cases that Kupp isn't Kupp, but – there's also cases where Nacua and Kupp are both fantastic. We know Stafford's a nice price. It gives us the flexibility from this build. I like Kupp's price. I want to be in on Cooper Kupp at this price. I think talking through Jonathan Taylor's timeline, Kupp and Taylor were very linked last year as guys that were kind of going in the first round until the very late drafts, and they fell multiple rounds. Kupp with his re-injury of his hamstring late in August, and then he finally comes back, but he's never really fully healthy. Yeah, maybe he's over the hill, right? Maybe he's too old. But what if last year was just, he was never really fully healthy, and a full off season of healing up that hamstring allows him to get back and have a healthy season. Certainly with the emergence of Nacua, you see these guys working out together. They're close. I mean, you feel like energized about what they're doing with the Rams. A lot of people thought the Rams were going to just like tank last year. That Kupp was going to be hurt, that Stafford was going to get hurt. There was some talk that like Stafford might retire in the offseason. And then with Kupp, when his hamstring got injured, there was some rumors that it was such a bad hamstring injury that he might have to retire. And then you see the emergence of Nacua and Kyron Williams and the excitement, the energy around the team, some young stars coming. And I mean, I feel like it would not be crazy to see Cooper Kupp rebound and have another couple good years. It would not be crazy to see Matthew Stafford continue to have a couple good years. They have obviously a really strong year last year and they make the playoffs and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, this is a good team. Like they do lose Aaron Donald, which is a pretty huge thing for their defense. But I feel very comfortable building a stack around this team. I don't think Nacua has to have Kupp get hurt. I don't think that Kupp exploding would be bad for Nacua even, because it could just be something where the Rams are really, really good on offense again, right? And the price on Stafford really solidifies my willingness to take both these guys because I feel comfortable we'll be able to get him. No one else is going to have him stacked up. You don't take anyone else from the Rams. You don't take a tight end or anything. I mean, this just feels... It's aggressive, but it feels like a really fun start.
Yeah, and I have Higgins, Flowers, Dell all ranked ahead of Kupp, but also Kupp at the end of the third round. So basically, I'm being a little bit more aggressive with the receivers than running backs, and certainly the QBs I've moved down a little bit. But I do like the guys together there in this situation where I'm not necessarily trying to do that a lot. But I think that Nacua and Kupp, then with Stafford, hopefully very cheap, we'll have to be a little bit careful that we don't get so confident that no one else will want him that we somehow miss out, because we do want that third piece of that now. But yeah, I think it's a fun mix together. One of the things with Kupp is just that it's still, we want to be aware of the cliff and that he may have fallen over the cliff. He may be done. And yet at the same time, if you get what he was previously, I mean, he was a very justifiable top 5 pick last season. To get him in early round 4, even knowing what Nacua does. I mean, there's, like you said, there are scenarios where they thrive together. I think that's pretty fun.
And even with the injury and not having as good of a year and not being the same player, clearly not the same explosiveness, he had spike weeks last year. He had 4 games of 110 plus yards in only like 12 games played. We're back up. Kincaid falls to the end of the round here. Xavier Worthy is still here. We usually take him, I don't know, in the 3rd round. Where did we take him last time? When I say we, I mean you.
It was later than this. But he is my top value. Dalton Kincaid, though. Is that again?
Yeah. We'll go back to the Kincaid. Well, the other pick for me at the Kupp selection would have, for me personally, I don't think you feel this way, but it would have been Kelsey. I still think getting Kelsey in the early 4th round is bonkers for some of the reasons we talked about during our last stream when we did talk about Worthy and Rashee Rice. Kelsey still has the potential, and he just signed an extension as well. Still has the potential to be the tight end 1 pretty comfortably, frankly. You look at what he did in the postseason and factor that into, he had a tough regular season, but that's huge. Worthy goes at the turn. You have Jaden Reed at the top here. He's really not one of my favorites in this range. Is there anyone else you'd be comfortable? Okay. Well, so you just slid Kyle Pitts to the top, and now I feel a lot happier.
Perfect.
I mean, you'd think at this point that I wouldn't like clicking Kyle Pitts' name so much, but it's still just fun to draft Kyle Pitts.
But I haven't had that dream again since I told you about it, where he had scored 2 touchdowns in the first half of week 1, and I didn't have enough exposure. I'm going to have enough exposure, so that dream will hopefully stop occurring. I think that the 2 tight ends here are a great way to play it if you don't have the receiver that you want. I think Jordan Addison is very interesting. It would have been a little bit early to take him, so I just want to be careful about that. Xavier Worthy actually did go 1 pick ahead of us there. The 2 Chiefs receivers,
which was 10 picks ahead of ADP for him. And sorry, you were just going to say the 2 Chiefs receivers. Rashee Rice went 502 as well. They both went very high.
Yeah, so they were more coveted in this draft. Then Jaden Reed is one that I feel like I was wrong on last year, and I'm not, trying to overcompensate for that, but just want to reflect the dynamism that he showed. I guess the way that I'm looking at it right now is I think the rest of those guys are going to fill out the targets for Jordan Love very nicely, including the 2 tight ends. And then Jayden Reed is probably going to be the guy who spikes. Yet one of the storylines that I don't know, how people on social media are covering it, but I do think it was interesting. Christian Watson has supposedly gone to great lengths, including a lot of medical testing, to figure out how to address his soft tissue injuries. And they think they have a plan. He's a guy who, if he comes back and plays a full season healthy, maybe he is a less expensive version of getting like the big time upside out of that Packers offense. You had mentioned that you have some concerns about that passing offense. One of the things they did last year was scheme their guys wide open. Is that something that you think defenses will be able to adjust to?
No. I think Matt LaFleur doesn't get enough credit for it. I think people, I think the comment I made was that I'm not necessarily buying as much. I feel like, and so maybe I don't want to be addressing a straw man, but I feel like most people I talk to believe that the Jordan Love breakout happened and he's a star now. And he's clearly in a group. Like, I'm very comfortable saying that about CJ Stroud. It's really what you just said that gives me a little bit of pause, where Jordan Love, I think, did make some mistakes. And I think Matt LaFleur doesn't get enough credit for scheming the things open that he did. And so maybe they defenses figure some of those things out. But I think my point more is maybe we already saw something close to the high end of the range of outcomes for them, where they were already maximizing what they're able to do scheme-wise and some of that stuff. I think when you see that type of breakout from a young quarterback, you think, what's the next step? Where can these guys go? And I'm not necessarily buying that, because I think the next step then becomes, what can Jordan Love do? And I guess this is unfair to Jordan Love, but it'd be a little bit like the Rams with Jared Goff, where they were really good offensively. And then eventually Sean McVay said, look, I've schemed up everything I can, and there's limitations to what Jared Goff can do for me. I need to go get Matthew Stafford because I need the quarterback to have the dynamism to take this to the next level here. I'm not saying that Jordan Love is only Jared Goff, and I'm not saying that he won't have the dynamism of a Matthew Stafford. He might already be, in that range. I don't know. I'm not saying, again, I'm not sure of anything. I just feel like there's a lot of confidence in Jordan Love's breakout that I don't feel as confident about. I feel like a lot of it was from what Matt LaFleur did well and a lot of that stuff. And to that same point about, like, maybe they were hitting sort of on the higher end of their range of outcomes, I'd say the same about Jayden Reed specifically as a draft pick, as a motion guy, as a slot guy. They didn't even use him a ton in the playoff game, which was weird. His routes rate was really low in a must-win game or in the playoff games. They felt good about their outside receivers as they had developed that. They have a really young receiving core. Went into the season with all guys from 2022 and 2023 classes last year, and then got the breakout from Reed, and he's the type of player that can get the ball into his hands. Anyway, we're back up on the clock. You have Watson at the top. I agree with that take that you gave, that Watson might be a better way to play it because of the spike week potential. And I do think that there's a lot of variability still in how this young receiving core develops. I like all the guys you have in the queue, for the record. We're really low on time. We can go any
Watson
direction.
over Godwin?
Sure. I mean, that's who you have at the top. I would be okay with Godwin. He's probably my least favorite, honestly, of the queue. I'm not like really into the Godwin thesis again this year. It was disappointing last year. I liked him a lot last year.
He just didn't score touchdowns, and that is important. I don't know if that carries over.
I was hoping that Godwin would take over from Evans and be like the star. And Evans was so good with Baker as well, and they brought Baker back and they re-signed Evans. I feel like Godwin's more of the second fiddle. It's just a little bit of a concern for me there.
Yeah, I Jalen McMillan into that group, somebody who obviously you're very familiar with and a lot of people are very high on. It seems like there could be either some overlap or just, if McMillan does play well, the targets won't be there that Godwin needs. The reason I put him in is he's way below ADP. He is going to come back, it looks like. But this, to me, seems like it's probably a DeAndre Swift pick. But I'm not that high on DeAndre Swift, but there have been a variety of spots where it seems to make sense. The other pick here would be to reach on Jaylen Warren.
I took I was going to say, so the other guys you had in the queue were Swift, Jaylen Warren, DeAndre Hopkins. Godwin does go on that turn before we're back up here at 803. Swift was the name that stood out to me. I actually, if you're not that high on him, I might be higher on him. The only other thing at the top of the ADP is Jordan Love is up there. We just took Christian Watson, but I don't feel pressure to get our QB1 here. I would be Swift, I think.
Excellent.
We do go there.
Route.
I
like Jordan Love. I think that he could break out, and yet the price here when you have starting running backs and you're going to have other options, I guess I don't care for.
So Swift to me makes actually almost no sense here in the regard that he got the contract despite not having a great season. We know
when you
that
say
the
no
Bears,
sense, you're saying that his ADP should be higher.
It should be higher. It should really be higher. I took a lot of him actually in the pre-draft. He might be one of my highest drafted running backs. And Shawn, you were high on Swift last year, and you know that we talked about it a lot. I had a hard time kind of buying in and being concerned. One of my big concerns was a lack of volume in the passing game, and that didn't really pan out in a great way. But and he wasn't necessarily a great rusher either. So I took 15% of him in the pre-draft range. I was just going to go look that up, but which is almost double, what you would on an average amount. And I certainly wasn't taking none of him. But the way I look at it is they paid him a good amount of money. He does have good other running backs in his backfield, but there's the potential for him to get the lead back deference in the green zone. I think there's the potential with a rookie quarterback. We sometimes see those teams not throw as much in the green zone and lean on the run game when they get in close. But for me, the key is the Bears offense is good. They have, I'm not saying that Caleb Williams is definitely going to be good. One of the things that we've been telling people, Shawn, to be concerned about is they have all these great receivers, but also rookie QBs don't always get the really high pass rate. So they're going to probably run the ball, but defenses have to respect Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze and Cole Kmet. They have all sorts of weapons. I think there's going to be room for Swift to run. I think his receiving can rebound. He got the contract and the pay that suggested he might even get some goal line work. His high value touches should really bounce back, because that was the other issue on the Eagles, is that you didn't get the goal line work as much as you'd like, because you get the tush pushes and everything. As far as a specific type of usage for fantasy scoring, a lot of that should rebound. You think he's the lead back in a good offense, and also one that might not throw as much as it should because it has a rookie quarterback. Sign me up in the 8th round. Like, why wouldn't we be in on that? And if you're not in on that, then you should be taking a lot of Khalil Herbert late, if you ask me, and Roschon Johnson as well. You want backs out of this backfield, don't you?
No, maybe.
I just made such a passionate case, Shawn.
Do they cannibalize, you think? In terms of my rankings, I have him at 702. So where we picked him would be a great rankings value. But part of that is that once the wide receiver cliff hits for me, I'm basically just completely out on him. So partly it's that I have other running backs higher as well. Unfortunately, a couple other running backs who just go in terms of Brooks and Benson and Javonte Williams and maybe it's basically those guys. So I was hoping one of them would get back to us, because we're kind of staring at that Chase Brown pick again, which, there's no problem with doing it 3 times in a row, because these aren't going to be the only drafts that we do. He's not a great ADP value here. He's
going to go at least at 106. We're at pick 106.
Who do you like here? The people the people who are the ADP values, very unappealing.
Yeah, that would be it, is to suck it up and say we already have Jonathan Taylor. We could take AD Mitchell, who's the biggest ADP value. If you want to get a receiver, we could go do that. Okay, we grab AD Mitchell. We're already betting on the Colts passing game. The other name that is slid a little bit is Curtis Samuel. That's as far as Shawn's saying, not appealing for our audio listeners that aren't watching on YouTube. And then Nick Chubb was the third one who you and I both liked, and it sounds like we've gone through the same journey, because originally I was taking some of him on some of my slows, and then I was like, this knee injury is pretty bad. And it sounds like you're thinking the same way. It's unfortunate, but it's tough to Chase Brown does go. on the turn there, well ahead of ADP. The other point I was going to say on him is it's hard to see that he's not going in this range, at least at 109 is where he went there. We're back on the clock at 111. You have Tyjae Spears at the top of the queue, Courtland Sutton behind him. I'm comfortable with Sutton. He's a veteran that I think we could definitely take some pieces of. If you want to grab Jaden Daniels, he just moved in. We could. Okay, we're going to go Sutton. I was going to say I was comfortable with Tyjae Spears too, but we just took him in the last draft. But we're kind of varying our picks here a little bit. So we now wind up with a little bit of an earlier receiver build this time around than the other two, or at least in the sense of hitting some receivers in this round 7 to round 10 range. We went Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors, and Cooper Kupp in rounds 1, 3, and 4. Hit a couple tight ends, took Christian Watson in 7, just took A.D. Mitchell and Courtland Sutton at the 9-10 turn, which is not something that's a range in our last 2 drafts, Shawn, that we didn't take a receiver, I don't think, in a round either way in either of our drafts. I think kind of 8, 9, 10, 11, we were taking a lot of running backs and some QB. I guess we took Burrow in round 7 in our second draft. But anyway, a little bit more exposure to some of these receivers here. It feels better to have 7 receivers through, or I guess only 6, but 6 receivers through round 10. I'm not sure how much better it will actually be, as we talked about at the end of our second draft as we recapped it. And we do miss out on that really fancy running back depth that we liked. This build has Jonathan Taylor at the top. We liked the value on DeAndre Swift falling as our RB2. But as you noted, round 9 wiped out a lot of those running back values that we like. And Chase Brown was really the only one that we were thinking about there at the end of round 9, and he goes at the 9-10 turn. Tyjae Spears would, I guess, be the other one that we had in the queue. We took Sutton instead. And so now, at this point, only have Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift. Our other drafts, we had typically had 3, 4 running backs, even though we hadn't taken a running back as high as Jonathan Taylor yet.
And one of the things we've been able to do with the Mitchell and Sutton picks is to get quite a bit of ADP value. Now, how much that matters this early is certainly up for debate. But I thought that since we didn't have a clear-cut pick at the running back spot, that it was the right time to, again, show some humility with it in a situation that, I mean, I like Mitchell a lot. If I'm wrong about the Indianapolis passing offense, then I'm going to want to have had some of him. I think that's a good place to do it. The thing with Courtland Sutton, I love Bo Nix. I think that the Denver passing offense is going to be good. You know, how much sense does it make to be completely loaded up on their number 2 and 3 guys and pass on the person who just set a career high in touchdowns? And probably the answer is it doesn't make sense to be 100% on the other players. And so this gives you a chance to get Sutton at a really good price. And, you know, if the running back value isn't there, it also gives us a chance to just get some variety for the stream today or for the show, where we can kind of pound those fun late running backs, which we haven't needed to do because of the depth that we had. I'm looking forward to making those picks later in this particular league.
Yeah, I am too. At the end of our second draft, we talked about a pick that we were low on the clock, and I suggested Ty Chandler. Asked you what you would have done on that pick, and you mentioned Ray Davis, who landed with the Bills. I hadn't seen his name near the top of the ADP. I think maybe he went 2 picks after Chandler, but I think maybe he went a little ahead of his ADP. But I liked that call. He's one that I'd love to get some exposure to late in this draft. It looks like a really fun one in his landing spot with the Bills. There's a lot of interesting ones. We took Kamani Vital in our second draft as well. Another day 3 running back who landed in a fun spot and is those rookies right now are fun ones to take, I think, to build out this type of a build. So we're going to have fun in the later rounds with that. We're almost back up here, Shawn. Only the 2 running backs.
Oh, then I wanted those guys so much. They went the last 2 picks. Now I don't want to pick at all at this spot.
Tyjae Spears and Jaden Daniels go off 1-2 right before us. So Kirk Cousins is an option with Kyle Pitts. Do we have to start thinking about Stafford here? Should we just take him?
probably in the next pick. Do you want to take Charbonnet first, or you just want to take
Sure.
Stafford?
Yeah. No, let's take Charbonnet. We've had him in the queue each of the last like 3 drafts. So the guys that Shawn was frustrated about, for anyone not watching on YouTube, Tyjae Spears made it all the way back to 1108. We had let him slide at the 1003. We picked again at 1110. So about 20 picks between us and 18 picks. And he goes 2 picks before us. The other guy was Jaden Daniels, who we've had in the queue all 3 of our drafts. And you've, Shawn, said that we really want to get some exposure to, and is the type of player that we could even take unstacked. We mentioned at the pick 10 really briefly. He comes all the way back to 1109 and goes right before us. We do get Justin Herbert off the board there at the turn. A couple other insignificant picks. Stafford is 6th on the ADP list right now. I think we have to take him here instead of trying to push him all the way back around. You'd love to try to push him around. In the first draft, we had both Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and Cousins went right at ADP to an unstacked drafter. You could definitely run into that again here with Stafford. We have both Puka and Cooper Kupp on this team. We did have Cousins there as one QB going ahead. We could have taken Cousins stacked with only Pitts in this draft. But when you have both Puka and Kupp, it feels like you're pretty committed to getting Stafford. Didn't have any other clear option there. You went ahead and clicked Stafford. Are you pretty comfortable with that pick there?
Yeah, I don't love it, but
you would have liked to play chicken to 13-10, huh?
Well, again, we've gotten enough ADP value. Jake Bowes, who wrote fantastic best ball content for us last year, made the case that the data suggested ADP values on quarterbacks far less important than ADP values at running back and wide receiver. I'm looking forward to all of his great work again this season. Ben, what are we now? We're 2 hours and 42 minutes in, so it's probably safe that the people listening are going to be willing to hear me say that if you want to subscribe to those articles, the coupon code is RVRadio2024 at checkout for a 10-year, not a 10-year. You get a 10% discount on a 1-year subscription. Yeah, I think you just go ahead and take the quarterback there. There was no other pick either that really stood out. Jalen Wright is pretty fun. I'm hoping he gets back to us, but and or Kirk Cousins. I mean, you can see the quarterbacks really slide in these drafts. And if he made it all the way through, which isn't likely, but is not impossible, then we could get both of those guys. I kind of think it's fun to have the pass-oriented QB stacked with your receivers and then a mobile element to offset that. And when I say fun, I think it's both fun and tactically sound. So, getting Kirk Cousins in this draft doesn't fire me up as much as it might in a different situation, but certainly if he came all the way back to the 13, we would.
Well, now you're just making me that much madder that Jaden Daniels went 1 pick ahead of us. If we get Daniels and his spike week potential and Stafford and the sort of the floor of pass volume when you have the Nacua and Kupp thing you're already betting on the Rams being a pretty solidly pass, leaning team. I like that that tandem as well, where you get the steady pass volume from a pocket passer who can be efficient, who's good, and will probably get you the minimum sort of 15 QB points that you're expecting almost every week. I mean, you're hoping basically every week, like give you that floor. Not a lot of those types of guys won't give you sub 10-point games because they're going to throw 250 plus yards every single time, which is great. And then you add to it Jaden Daniels, and you add the 30-point week spike potential that it's tactically sound. It makes a lot of sense. It would have been a really fun turn there to get both of our QBs. But hey, we have Zach Charbonnet as our RB3. How do you feel?
I like him for this year. I don't know that you're going to, go tell your friends later, I got Zach Charbonnet at the 130.
Yeah, that is a little disappointing compared to the excitement of potentially grabbing Jaden Daniels there. All right, so we're almost back up at pick 154, 13-10. There's some QB values, and then you start a ton of running backs, and we do need to start hitting running backs. You have Ty Chandler at the top of the queue. We took him in the last draft. I agreed with you on liking Ray Davis more than him. Ray Davis is indeed going 17 picks behind him on ADP. How do you want to play this?
Yeah, let's go ahead and take Chandler. The part that was a little bit disappointing for me is that his ADP is ahead of Kendre Miller, but Miller went at the 151. I thought Miller would have been perfect for this team. I think that his breakout upside in 2024 is immense. And to have lost him here is too bad because his ADP is 5 spots below where we were. But again, at this point in the draft, that can happen to you very, very easily. We've gotten an embarrassment of riches today, or just we've gotten very favorable drafts in that we haven't taken too many players that we wouldn't consider to be our guys. We differentiated in some specific cases, but we've gotten great prices. And so losing a price that we wanted right there, obviously you can't complain.
Yeah, not too much. I agree with you heavily on Kendre Miller just wasn't healthy last year. And yet we're going into New Orleans having the same situation this year where you don't have a lot behind Kamara, and he's another year older. Jamal Williams didn't do anything. I mean, there's no real reason to be like, this isn't Kendre Miller's team. I mean, he's one of my favorite late round running backs as well. He would have been a really fun pick there. We go with Chandler. We're back up. A couple QBs went on that turn, Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers. We only have Stafford at this stage, but I mean, should we just lock up the Ray Davis pick that we both really like? I mean, that's what you have at the top of the queue. I'm very comfortable getting our RB5 there in Davis. You go ahead and snatch him up. And so our build right now is Matthew Stafford, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Zach Charbonnet, Ty Chandler, and Ray Davis. It's still a pretty fun running back room, even though we didn't, quite hammer that late single-digit, early double-digit round range as much as we wanted to. We really liked the way that came together in our first 2 drafts, but that's still a pretty fun one. And it gets back to a thing that we talked about at the end of the second draft, where you feel pretty good about the running backs you have to take at every spot, at least maybe until round 18. But there's a lot of running back ranges where I'm comfortable drafting one of the running backs. There's not as many wide receiver ones, as we know. Wide receiver, Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors, Cooper Kupp, Christian Watson, A.D. Mitchell, Courtland Sutton. Tight end was Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts. We hit both of those guys. It's a fun team. I mean, I really like sort of what our round 7, 9, 10 wide receiver picks did for our ability to I don't know. I guess the last 2 drafts, I just got a little bit itchy. When you don't take enough receivers early, Shawn, it's just, it makes you a little bit squirrely. That QB2, is this another Justin Fields team? Because you want that mobility late?
Love it. I did put Drake Maye in the queue before our last pick. He would have been somebody who projects to go in between the picks. And, certainly he could fall at this point. And then it would be kind of a Maye and then Baker type of team, with the idea that Maye would add rushing value for you. But yeah, I'm going to love Justin Fields with it here. I'm a little distracted at this point with just imagining Jaden Daniels on the roster. But I like the fit. We're probably going to want to get one more receiver, which is the reason why that Maye and Baker together is vaguely interesting. I better go ahead and put Baker in. His ADP is 187. Devontae Walker, I'll add in.
And you're referring to Javon Baker, the receiver. For a second, I thought you were talking about Baker Mayfield. But you're talking about stacking Drake Maye and Javon Baker. That's a stack that we did in the first draft today. And I would love to get that here. That would be a fantastic addition.
And as we are 4 picks away, he hasn't gone yet. You mentioned Baker Mayfield. He did go. That is perhaps a tiny bit of a surprise, but I'm sure that drafter has that stacked up properly. Ben, the names that I have here at running back: Kamani Vidal, Will Shipley, Tyrone Tracy, Isaac Guerrero, Dylan Laube, and Tank Bigsby. They're long shots, but I think in each case, if the shot pays off, it could pay off in a huge way.
Yeah, all those names sound really interesting to me. We're at the point in the draft. We just took Ray Davis. J.K. Dobbins just went. You just switched screens on me, but I was going to name the other running backs that just went. Oh, Antonio Gibson is one of the ones that just went. So J.K. Dobbins, Jaleel McLaughlin, Bucky Irving, Antonio Gibson, and Vidal does go. Kamani Vidal goes a couple picks before us. But that's the running backs that have just gone off the board in the last couple of rounds. We are back on the clock. Drake May made it to us. And at about a 12 pick ADP value, feels like the pretty obvious pick to me.
Yeah, I don't think there are a lot of other guys in this range. Once we lose Vidal, all of the running backs that I like have 200s ADPs, which is not that far away. That's just 20 picks. But we probably will have some variety of options later. Baker is at 186. We're going to pick at 183, which means probably go ahead and make that, unless you prefer to take Demario Douglas.
I had his name on the tip of my tongue because I'm getting ready to make that case. I mean, he's going to slide a little bit behind ADP here. He's an interesting answer too. Although I think you made a really good case in our first draft that if Maye's hitting a ceiling, it's probably not because of a Douglas type. It's because of either Jalen Polk or Javon Baker breaking out as a vertical weapon. But I think there are some scenarios where Maye's adding rushing value and Douglas is sort of the target leader and all of those things. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? I'm open to just going Baker again. I could see going Douglas and then hoping Baker maybe even comes back and trying to get both of them as well. Or do you think that's too big of a Patriot stack after we did a triple stack in our first draft today?
Well, let's get Douglas.
And so we get him at a 7-pick ADP. It's not probably as correlated to the breakout for Maye, the upside scenario for Douglas, as the Baker one is probably. But it's a good price, and it's still a nice stack that we got both of them at an ADP discount, as you've been talking about. We've been trying to be wary of that. For a rookie to have a 23% targets per out run, I know he didn't have a lot of competition. I think that's a very fair point, but he did a lot right for these guys. And now you have two rookies coming in behind him with some question marks in their profiles still. I feel pretty comfortable saying that Demario Douglas is one of the better target earners on this roster. I kind of like the pick.
Yeah. And despite some of my other comments about how I think that receiver room could fall out, if Maye is a big step up and the coaching staff is a big step up, maybe that unlocks the guy who just was so impressive as a rookie. You'd feel pretty silly if you missed on him, and that was the case when you're building around Drake Maye. Ben, when we went into the draft today, were you thinking we're almost certainly going to come out with all four Patriots wide receivers?
Yeah. I was not actually thinking that we would have two Patriot stacks. That was probably the furthest thing from my mind. It is concerning they went and got KJ Osborne, who can play in the slot a little bit, that Juju's still on the roster. But I mean, yeah, he led the team in targets with 79 last year. No other wide receiver was higher than 55. I mean, it's a new coaching staff and everything else. We talked a little bit more about this in the first draft, and there's some reasons to be concerned, certainly, but there's also reasons to be like, yeah, let's not be crazy. He was the guy who led the team in volume last year in receiving yards. He just didn't score a touchdown all season. It's the same thing as Jacoby Myers early in his career. If you could get some touchdowns, that would be helpful. So as we look ahead on this build, Shawn, he was our wide receiver 7. We have 5 running backs. We do have the 2 quarterbacks already and 2 tight ends. Do you think this is a 3 QB build with Maye as our QB2?
Man, this is a tough one because I do actually want to add to not tight end. But I want to make 3 more picks. We need to add one more round here because I do want to take Justin Fields again. He goes, so we don't have to worry about that as much. I'm excited for Javon Baker to make it back. If we wanted to take somebody in round 20, Malik Washington, I think is very, very interesting. I think he is going to rise. I had him as very similar to Malachi Corley, but better. And when we had Danny Kelly on OT, I mean, he made the same case. He's like, Malik Washington is better. The Miami Dolphins need that third receiver, both in a break glass in case of emergency situation, but also just to help those top two guys who are getting so much defensive coverage. But Baker is closing in and getting back to us. I do think we need at least one more running back. I think the other thing I was thinking in terms of wanting 3 more picks is I kind of want to add 2 more running backs too. You can't do that and take Baker. I'm very willing to, because this running back group is quite a bit weaker.
Yeah.
But I'm very comfortable going whichever direction you prefer here.
I mean, and I was going to say the same. If you don't want to add Baker at this point, I'm okay not adding Baker. But part of my thought on taking Douglas was that we could still get him, but I wasn't counting the rounds, So if we want to just say we made our stack with Douglas and go 2 running backs, that's fine. But I also think Baker's a fun way to double stack. Well, yeah, and you also have Malik Washington there too. I mean, we have a lot of ways to go.
So let's go ahead and take Shipley, even though if we are going to take Baker, that doesn't make sense because Tyron Tracy goes at the other pick. It's possible both of the guys could have gone in between. Now I think I'm back to Baker because Tracy was the other player I really wanted. Tracy's in a situation, probably should have taken him first. Although again, when you're talking about an older position switch guy, that part is pretty tricky. I think that Will Shipley, even though his receiving value. Ben, you mentioned this earlier. I was both ecstatic and depressed when he went where he went to the Eagles because I'm like, they think he's good. And also they won't use him properly.
I know. It was very similar to our Bucky Irving conversation earlier where he went a little higher than he was ranked in a lot of cases. I think this pick's going to be Baker here, Shawn. It's a badge bro that snatched up Tracy right away and looks like for their build that it was, oh no, they went running back. Hodrick Estime. So they went 2 rookies. I thought it might be another rookie pick, but so if you're back to Baker, we should just take Baker here to close it out. He made it all the way back. It's a huge ADP value. We have Drake Maye. I think we should take Baker.
It does seem like the other drafters are like, I don't know why anybody would want Baker if you don't have Drake Maye. And so that part of it is kind of fun. I wasn't planning this, but Ben, I love it.
Yeah, it's great. The point, just to finish on Shipley that we made with Irving, was that Shipley. I remember following along in real time that on ESPN he was still like 4 or 5 running backs down their list in terms of next best available. A lot of that tier went off the board right away, but I had the same reaction as I did with Irving, and you've alluded to having the same in both cases where you're like, well, okay, this team likes this player. They went and took him ahead of some other guys that a lot of places had ranked higher. And so that was cool to see. It was cool to see Shipley come off the board as the RB7. I think he was about the RB10 on a lot of boards. And he was a guy we really liked. We talked a lot about on the day 2 stream. And yet taking away that receiving upside by landing him on a team that couldn't even get the receiving out of DeAndre Swift is unfortunate, but he still has a lot of explosiveness and there's the potential for some big plays and some of that stuff. I think I'm with you where you went kind of right away, where you were hoping to push Tyrone Tracy through, but then as soon as he went, you went, I should have taken him first. I think I would have taken Tracy first because certainly it's pretty much as simple as saying he's behind Devin Singletary, whereas Shipley's behind Saquon Barkley, and how much those teams would be committed to the lead back.
And Ben, Malik Washington does go in this draft. So we had one other person who was thinking along slightly the same lines there. Yeah, you look at the guys they're competing with, and I mean, Will Shipley, I think he's going to be a star. Tyrone Tracy, every time I take him and every time I rank him, I try to remind myself not to get too crazy because of what the red flags are. But I mean, he features prominently in our rookie guide. Anybody who is looking for some content on the players, I have a lot out on the site. The RotoViz Volume 3, the rookie guide, is also out there. We love him. Again, his peripherals last year were fantastic. And this is an athletic running back in an offense that I guess I'm a much bigger believer than most people. And Ben, I think that you are too.
Yeah, you're talking about the Giants, right?
The Giants.
Yeah. I think they could be quite a bit better than people expect. I think we got neighbors in this draft. I was skeptical at first, or have been, but I've heard some good cases, and I'm pretty I've come pretty around on it. I think Brian Dable's a good coach. They had a tough year last year, but obviously a really good year the year prior. You have, I weirdly think the fact that they didn't address the QB2 in a major way is, kind of a pretty optimistic sign in the sense that they're pretty committed to Daniel Jones, and there's no question about that. And you got this young receiving core, and Daniel Jones' skill set, it's not perfect, but it is, it's interesting for fantasy. It fit well with what Brian Dable did 2 years ago. They won a playoff game. They went to the playoffs and then went into Minnesota and won a playoff game with Daniel Jones 2 years ago. And now you add a receiver that, the other receiver at the top with him has been called generational, but Shawn, you ranked this guy over that other generational receiver for a period of time in the pre-draft segment. So we have 2 generational receivers this year, but obviously just adds so much dynamism to a passing game that has been like a lot of number 2s or maybe even number 3s. It's felt like, but now you add a real number 1, and then all of a sudden you're going, okay, well, you have him, and then you have Wan'Dale Robinson, you have Jalen Hyatt, you have, Darius Slayton, some other depth pieces behind Malik Neighbors. Maybe this can be a whole different team in that regard. And so, yeah, it would be a lot of fun. I think Devin Singletary is the right back to keep that stabilized in the early parts of the season, but that Tracy could totally be the explosive, younger, more dynamic back that eventually, that is playing alongside that, and then eventually is maybe taking some of that extra work. Certainly Devin Singletary is not a player that can't be passed. Last year he did the passing on Dameon Pierce, but the expectation on him coming into the year was like he was nothing, at least as far as Devin Singletary is concerned. And frankly, he's still being drafted in like he went 11-02 here in the 11th round when he was their big signing in the offseason. Their starter from last year's gone, and they only added a 5th round running back that you just talked about was a position change guy. Devin Singletary should probably be going a little bit higher, but people are still just like, he's Devin Singletary. So there's a lot of options there. I had been, but when you asked me about the Giants question, looking at some of Shipley's numbers and just to drive it home and some of the excitement. You had talked about his athleticism. It's really strong in a lot of ways, but as a true freshman at Clemson, or I'm actually not certain that's a true freshman, but 2021 as a freshman. Is he a 3-year guy? Was he?
Yes.
So he was a true freshman. 149 rush attempts, 11 rushing TDs. So you get some explosiveness at a young age. 16 catches right away too, which in college, we talk about this some, but you don't see as massive of running back receiving numbers. Even just 20 catches in a season in college is usually pretty great because you see some rotational stuff. Next year, 15 rushing TDs on 210 carries, and then he had a 38 catch season the next year. He only played 12 games last year. Not quite as strong of a rushing season last year, but he caught 31 balls in only 12 games. So really, I was going to emphasize the receiving, but I also just wanted to emphasize he had 26 rushing TDs in his first 2 years right out of high school. But 16 catches, 38 catches, 31 catches, 85 total over 3 years, comes out as a 3-year early declare. That's a really fun profile. I just hate that 85 catches in 3 seasons is something you don't see on a lot of prospects boards. That's why we were so excited about Shipley, and as well as the tested athleticism and everything. Just hate that he lands somewhere where I'm like more confident than almost any other spot in the league that he's probably not going to be able to catch 50 passes, So it's you could have landed him a lot of other places. I could have talked myself into 50 plus catches as a secondary back.
Yeah, it really is such a bummer because the upside there is extreme. The issue with him was that the rushing volume and rushing peripherals in his final season were bad, and that knocked him way down in terms of perception. But you look at the overall resume, and then as soon as he tested the way he did his pro day, I'm like, I'm going to look at what he did early. I'm going to look at those receptions that you were talking about. And so, I have way too much, and I contributed that here again in this draft. I was kind of looking through my rankings. Obviously, we're juggling quite a bit of things late there. I actually have Tracy one spot ahead of Ray Davis, who we took early. We obviously should have taken him there. It would have been nice to have taken the Giants back with Malik Neighbors. It's kind of funny because we were joking about that third QB and getting the rushing value. I mean, Daniel Jones would have been a perfect fit at the end of this draft. So I think some mild mistakes
we missed that
at the end of, at the end of this draft. I still like this team, even though the running back depth chart is maybe a little bit flimsier.
That's not just on you, because when we were talking about that who are we going to pair with Stafford, I was thinking Maye too. You brought him up. I mean, that's the fun way to do it. And Maye falls way behind ADP, but we really could have just sat on Daniel Jones and made this a 2 QB build because we had Neighbors in round 3. I mean, that would have been a really late round QB2 move when Stafford's your QB1, but you're already committed to Puka, Neighbors, and Cooper Kupp. Like Stafford Daniel Jones would have been a fine 2 QB build in that regard. Yeah, I wish you wouldn't have said that. Now I'm mad. No, this was another fun team. I think the big conclusion for me, I'm curious your thoughts, but if I had to rank these teams, I really liked the 110s. And so I think our first draft today was my favorite roster. Things really fell into place for that team. I would say my second favorite was this one here, this third draft we did, the second one out of the 110. It also came together in a really fun way. The 106, a little trickier, maybe a little bit of a tougher room, didn't get the values we wanted, some of that stuff. I think that middle draft from the 106 would have been my third favorite, but not one that I hate or anything. Obviously, we're drafting players that we like, and we kind of like all the builds. What do you think? How did you feel about the different drafts?
Yeah, I'm going to rank them slightly differently. Because of Xavier Worthy. No, I'm gonna go with the first one. It was perfect, right? It was the perfect draft. I really liked that second draft. I love the running backs that we were able to get with the rest of that group, and to have gotten Kyron Williams in round 3. I think that's going to be unique enough that with the rest of the players there, and once the community adjusts to Xavier Worthy in round 3, like I have him, then that's going to look like a great value. So I'm going to do the first one, the second one, the third one. But I liked all 3. I was surprised that we were able to execute all of these things that we were looking at and get some really fun values. The other thing maybe in the second one, David Njoku, a little bit less appealing than the other guys. But again, I want to be on him enough without getting, an extreme exposure, and I think that was the perfect draft to do it. It fit really nicely. These other couple drafts where we have 2 of the pure star tight ends, I love that element. Anytime that you can get the receivers and Jonathan Taylor and then get both Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts. I mean, I'm skeptical, I think, of Christian Watson, Adonai Mitchell, and Courtland Sutton, and yet I love that we have them here. And so I think that you want to come out with at least a few humility-based drafts where you have some skepticism, but it's skepticism within the context of knowing that the structure worked, the ADP values were there, and that you are very deliberately taking some detours onto guys where you're going to have lower exposures, but you want some exposure. And so I like this third team quite a bit as well.
This third team, Shawn, I just realized we have not read back for the audio listeners. So let's do that now. Puka Nacua was the pick at 110. We went Jonathan Taylor in the early second. We felt like we had come right there at 203. You can sometimes be right on the other side of a pretty big tier break. So we went Puka, Jonathan Taylor, Malik Neighbors, Cooper Kupp, Dalton Kincaid, and Kyle Pitts at the 5-6 turn, hit tight end both times there, and then didn't come back to tight end in the rest of the draft. Christian Watson, DeAndre Swift, Adonai Mitchell, Courtland Sutton, Zach Charbonnet, Matthew Stafford, Ty Chandler, Ray Davis, Drake Maye, Demario Douglas, Will Shipley, and then Javon Baker late to put together that double stack with Drake Maye. It's a fun team. You may have sold me on team 2. I forgot about the Kyron Williams in round 3 pick. Sometimes you forget about the early rounds, right? I'm just thinking about how things built out in the late rounds. But then also as I read that, I remember we went Puka in the first round here, who I like. We had Justin Jefferson on that second team. We had Garrett Wilson on the first team. I like those guys a little bit more. Three fun teams. These are really, really fun builds, and it was a blast drafting them with you.
Yeah, and if Drake Maye is the 2024 CJ Stroud, these two teams are going to be in the mix in week 17 at the top of the leaderboard. So I'm going to have to change my dynasty rankings to reflect the fact that I'm all in on Drake Maye now.
I guess that's the other reason that team 2 wins is the first and third teams require Drake Maye to be the 2023 CJ Stroud.
Well, Ben, this was so much fun. Hope everyone who is listening to the full version or watching the first version on YouTube enjoyed the 3 drafts together. We will have these broken down in SB Shorts, which, Ben, is it a huge surprise to you? I'm sure it's not a huge surprise to the listeners that the SB Shorts are over an hour.
It's not a surprise to me, but that was not the goal. That was not what we were setting out to do.
The listeners we'll how many hours in the day do they think we have?
It's kind of ridiculous that we're like, we're going to do this a different way where we can still do long shows, but then we'll be able to release some short stuff. And they're like, oh, we have room to go even longer. Okay, we'll just go longer.
So we've enjoyed that. These will come out as Stealing Bananas shorts. Check them out wherever you would like. If you can, leave us rating and reviews for those. Those really help us. Again, if you can, subscribe. All those things help us with the algorithm. It will push up the numbers, will allow us to do more content for you. Ben, any final notes before I remind people who've been here for 3 hours what our names are?
Rashee Rice, not Xavier Worthy, is the biggest value in current drafts, but they both are massively underpriced.
So I have basically 100% of Rashee Rice in Dynasty. I'm looking forward to Dynasty drafts this weekend. I know listeners are as well. We have lots of content up on the site also for that. And I am hoping that Ben Gretch is as right on Rashee Rice as he is on most things. I'm Shawn Siegele. With me as always is Ben Gretch, whom you can follow at Yards Per Gretch, at Stealing Signals, at Stealing Lines. I think Ben has some cool plans for Stealing Signals Gold. Make sure you are keeping track of what he does with that. You'll want to get in there when he does the streams and ask him some of these questions. He's going to be great interacting with you. We'd love to have you guys over at RotoViz. Again, coupon code RVRadio2024 at checkout for a 10% discount on your 1-year subscription. We released volume 3 of the rookie guide. It is out. Lots of content from me and other members of the team. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.